Thank you for joining this webinar presented by me, NZL. Uh, Today we'll be talking about file shares, the most common problems in them, and we'll be sharing 3 different use cases, success stories. If you guys have any questions, please do ask. There's nothing we love more than getting questions. Can everyone see my screen right now?
We can. You're good to go.
Okay, nice. Let's get started. So here are the top file share concerns, and this is a very useful slide to convince your leadership to pay more attention to these data sources. First of all, technical problems. Okay, cost of file share data leak average 1.52 to 4.24 million dollars in 2022. This kind of sounds like a large number at a first look, but it really is not. It makes sense since most file shares are not managed for PII and sensitive information. And whenever you get into trouble with GDPR, CCPA, you either pay $4 million or 20% of your revenue. So that's a huge reason why this cost is so high. These problems are also growing every year. It's estimated that file shares grow about 30% each year. That means they'll be doubling every 2.5 years. So whatever you're dealing with right now, 2.5 years later, you'll be dealing with twice as many problems. This is everything concerning your future and your risk. Let's take a look at what they're costing you right now. File shares cost about $1,200 per terabyte. This is for on-prem file shares, and 60% of this cost is due to rot. If you decide to go to cloud, this cost can triple, so be careful. Employees waste about an hour every day searching through this rot, so that's a lot of productivity loss. And organizations lose quite a number of documents inside these file shares. It's estimated that they lose 2 to 5% of their records or the important information they should be keeping. Now, this is a long time question, right? End user versus tools. Can we rely on end users to clean this up? Should we just get a tool and try to automate everything? Unfortunately, there's not a really straightforward answer. You kind of have to have both, right? If you say, hey, let the end users clean these up, it's a lot of work. There are a lot of documents. It's kind of impossible. If you say, let's just get a tool and be done with it, well, the tool will have a hard time understanding what's an important document and what's not, right? That kind of insight lives within your organization, within your workforce. So you kind of have to have both. Now, you already have the end users, the workforce. So today we'll be talking a bit more about file share tools, what kind of tools are available on the market, and how you should go about selecting them. We built this kind of grading schema for you to help you with your selection. One of the most important things to pay attention to is the functionality, right? Are you trying to do an e-discovery project? Are you trying to minimize your risk and make sure you're compliant with regulations? Are you just trying to get rid of as much as data from there to reduce your cost? Or are you worried about your records management documents, right? So these are the most common types of functionalities. If you have more than 3 functionalities, we call that a platform. We highly recommend getting a platform when you're going for a cleanup project. They tend to be stronger, a bit more flexible, right? And they can manage data longer term. If you have a very small project, you say something like, hey, we just want to move to the cloud. We don't care about anything else. We just need help moving all of this data to the cloud. Then you can pick a point solution. These tend to work really, really well for what you buy it for, but you cannot really reuse it for any other use cases. Next thing to pay attention to is the data types, right? If you have SharePoint and your tool doesn't work with SharePoint, you're in tough luck. So this is more of just a cleanliness check, right? Make sure that whatever data sources you have, your tool works with it. Last and pretty much the most important one is processing depth. This is absolutely critical for long-term management, right? If you want to do short-term management, it's okay to do metadata management and have somewhat of an index. But if you want to manage this data for 2 years, 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, then the more you process this data, the easier it gets to manage it. Now, file share tool market changed a lot over the last couple of years. When I first presented this slide, I would say we have 3 types of tools. We have metadata only management, we have cybersecurity, and we have a full text index. Right now, it changed a bit. Cybersecurity tools caught up to metadata only management. So today you have 3 different types of tools. You still have the metadata management tool. You have what I would call a piggyback content management tool, and you have a full content management. With the metadata only management, the software opens up all of your files one by one, processes it based on your record rules, and then closes them up and says, hey, this is this kind of document. Extremely powerful for short-term projects, becomes a bit of a trouble when you start doing more of long-term management, right? When we're thinking about long-term management, we're thinking about things like e-discovery cases, right? You get sued, now you have to find your data. We're thinking about regulations changing. We're thinking about the direction of the company changing. So whenever one of these changes happen, these metadata only management tools can't really help you because they don't have the content of the data. So whenever a change happens, you actually have to go back to your tool and tell it, hey, I want you to reprocess all of this data. And in our field, in computer science, whatever you're doing with computers, processing is the most costly part of a project. So if you're trying to use these tools for long-term management, they tend to get ugly and expensive. The second type of tool is what we call the piggyback content management. These are tools that rely on data sources themselves, right? So it would say something like, hey, Microsoft keeps a full text index. It has content management. I'm just going to use that index. Better than metadata only management, it has its own issues. The important question here is, hey, if Microsoft already has it, why should I pay money to you, right? You're already relying on some other technology. They're not super, super helpful. The third type is full content management. These types of softwares create their own content index so that you can search things on your own. And their beauty is if the data source doesn't have that content management layer, right, these kinds of softwares will still help you. Now, as you can hear, we're going more and more towards this content management as a field, as file share management goes. And there are lots of ways to do it, but it's mostly in place and it's mostly becoming content management now. Here is the same evaluation framework. These slides will be made available to you. This is also on our LinkedIn and on our webpage. So if you want to grab it, yeah, feel free to go to our LinkedIn or wait for the email. Any questions so far? Requests, please do ask questions. We love them.
No questions in so far, but if you have questions for Kaan, please pop them in the Q&A box. Thanks.
Anytime. So with that, we can start talking more about these use cases. Here is the type of tool they used. This is our tool. This is what they got to help them. We will be covering 3 different use cases. The first 2 are from a top 5 bank. They are from the same top 5 bank. The first approach is for file share management, fraud cleanup, and GDPR and CCPA compliance. They have over 200,000 employees and about 3 petabytes of data. Their biggest priority was minimizing risk cost effectively. Here is what we recommended to them. We said, hey, you should do something called release processing, or in other words, use big buckets, right? Your priority is cost effectiveness. So if you see a video on your file share that hasn't been opened in 20 years, and these are not regulated file shares, right? Chances are it's raw. You don't have to open that video. You don't have to transcribe it. You don't have to do a ton of processing and lose money and time. Here's another way to look at it. When you start, you have about 3 petabytes of unknown. You start with the easiest processing possible. This is the metadata processing. You ask your workforce, hey, do you know where our records are? Do you know where the trash is? And you just go in, declare your records, and get rid of the trash. Usually the next steps involve the content. This is where you'll find PII and specific types of records. You're always left with this middle section, the unknown part. It's next to impossible to know everything about data because there's so much of it and it's highly context dependent. So we usually recommend them, hey, have a proactive approach here. Something like this data gets deleted if the employee leaves the company and we waited 7 years. Now, the beauty of in-depth processing is once you get all the way here, you can actually keep going. And you can start looking into your content more and more so that you can automate the management of this data. And the more you automate it, right, the less of a cleanup you have to do. Now you're proactively keeping these file shares clean, so you don't ever have to go back and do this whole process again. Any questions so far?
We do have one quick question. Sorry.
Okay.
Somebody wants to know, what did this customer do with the identified records?
They decided to keep it in their file shares, but they moved it into more of a secure location. Yeah. So it's still on the file shares. This customer, at this point, they were not super worried about locking down these records and keeping it safe. They were more worried about deleting the trash. Their company historically never deletes anything, so they were not too worried about deletion.
Okay, there's a follow-up question. How do they apply retention to the records in the share files?
So it's what we call a soft retention. Whenever you're doing in-place management, it's really, really hard to apply retention policies. This is because you're relying on the data source, right? In here, you're relying on file shares. Everyone has access to these file shares pretty much. Anyone can go in and delete these file shares. So there's really no way to make it 100% defensible with your retention schedule. If these are your highest value records, you should be moving them out of those file shares because someone can still delete it. Now, this company wasn't too worried because, as I said before, they have this habit of never deleting data. So they were quite sure these records would be kept safe. But this is also the second use case I'm going to talk about right after.
All right, we have one more follow-up question. Can the
Okay.
retention code be applied to the folder level?
Yes, that is more tool dependent, right? And that's usually what we see with a lot of the metadata management tools. With us, you can both apply at the folder level as well as the file itself. So if you say, hey, I want to go super granular with this, I want to declare my records very specifically, we let you go into the file level. So I see more questions popping up. If they never delete records, then they would still be fine from a GDPR, CCPA, well, it became CPRA now, standpoint. Yes, that is true. We have seen these fines go up. They are still not too scary to some of these companies. I think it was last year that Amazon paid, I think, $1.2 billion in fines, and they just scoffed at it. So that is absolutely true. It's just we haven't exactly gotten there yet. Also, another thing in here with this company, whenever they saw PII, they somewhat treated it as rot. So they would tag it with two different tags. They would say, that, hey, this is a record, but this also has PII, right? And since it's a record, we have to keep it, but we know we have to delete it at the end of the day because there's that PII tag. Okay, that looks like all the questions for now. Thanks for asking. Please. I love questions. We love questions at CL. We love helping people. So ask away. So this is to fill your curiosity a bit more. Same bank. This time they had a bit of a different use case, right? They wanted to optimize their cloud costs and they wanted to improve defensibility. The more companies go to cloud, the more we hear about this horror story of going over your budget, right? Microsoft gives you a certain deployment size, usually a couple terabytes, sometimes petabytes, depending on the size of your company. Pretty much every company we talk to has already gone over their limit. And whenever you go over your limit, you start paying a lot more. So in here, their goal was, hey, we realize no one deletes these documents, but we still want to keep them safer, and we want to minimize our cloud costs. And this is where we recommend some kind of archiving integration, right? You have those very high value documents that you absolutely need to keep safe. Move it to an archive. Move it to a dedicated repository. That's the only way to make sure that your data doesn't go missing. Similar thing with the cloud cost optimization, right? When we see this a lot in our field, it's starting to pop up. A lot of these archiving players just to minimize the cloud costs because cloud is expensive, right? They're keeping it on a first level storage, expensive storage. And you can archive most of those documents into cheaper storage because it's with most data, they have a short half-life, right? Most emails don't get read ever again after 30 days. We have seen a lot of companies put some kind of like retention schedule, not the regulated ones, but some kind of retention deletion schedule of 90 days for all their emails. So we already see this happening, right? If you have data and it's not being accessed, it's not being used, move it to a cheaper storage, deduplicate it. If you have data that's high value, move it to a good archive, lock it down, and keep it safe. Any more questions? All right, going ahead. This is actually one of the most interesting use cases. It's from a major retailer, and they wanted to do divestitures. Whenever you're doing divestitures, it's a lot like creating a new retention code for all of your data. You need to figure out which data goes where. And they had over 100 terabytes of this data, and they really want to be defensible, right? Because you kind of have two requirements when you're doing divestitures when it comes down to data. First, you have to give the other company everything they need. That's literally on the agreement. Hey, if I'm selling this department, all of their data goes with the department. I cannot hold on to that data for myself. Second is that I don't want to give them any of my private data, my sensitive data, right? I don't want to share any kind of company secrets, any kind of R&D documents that's outside of that department. So they had to be very careful with being defensible. We said, hey, you should just start slow and take your time. And what this means is start with just figuring out your data sources. File shares, SharePoint, Google Drive, Box, other kind of file shares. And then spend most of your time performing analysis. Look at the metadata, visualize it, look at the content, visualize it, search it, look for specific documents. Once you have done all of these, start tagging. Tag them heavily. It's okay if you're using 50 or 5,000 tags, right? The more tags you have, the more curated your data is, and the more defensible the process becomes. Once you've spent vast majority of your time in these two steps, then you can go on to the third step, which is to take action. This can be deleting documents, it can be declaring records and pulling them into a dedicated archive, or in this case, it was just moving this data around so that they could sell off this department. Now, when this company started, they had about 55 tags. By the time they finished their project, if I remember correctly, they had 6,500 tags. The way they went with this project is they sat down with their records management team, their compliance team, and their legal team. And they told them, hey, go into these file shares with the tool we got you and just start tagging. Just tag as much as possible. Everyone gets to work parallel to each other. By the end of the analysis stage, they gathered all of these people and they started looking at these tags, right? Which documents have 2 tags? Which documents have 5 tags? Which documents have 20 tags? And looking at these patterns, they were able to create hierarchical rules. And that actually ended up becoming their, let's call it retention schedule for lack of a word, more of their movement plan of the data. And this is how they did it from the business perspective, not the tool perspective. I do not see any questions so far in this, so I'm moving forward. Oh,
All right, so there is one question. Did this
okay.
company have a dispensable RRS that enabled them to identify the types of records they had, tag them, and apply policy?
I'm not great with acronyms. Can someone tell me what RRS is?
I am equally not as great with them. Somebody wants to, oh, records retention schedule.
They had, but in this case, it wasn't exactly about that schedule, right? In here, they're trying to sell off a company, so they had to come up with completely new rules. And that's why they had to go through all of this trouble of, analyzing their data, looking at it. Because in here, we're not exactly looking for retention, right? Our goal is not to retain these documents. It's to separate our data into 2 neat chunks. So although they had those retention policies, was it helpful? Yes. Did they still have to do a lot of work? Definitely yes.
Right, Con, we have one more question.
All right.
When you say tag, what type of tag? How are the tags created? Can you explain?
Yes. So when we're talking about tags, we're usually talking about metadata tags. In here, they're metadata tags. What our software does is it does not change the original data itself. That's a bit of a risky move, right? We come from that defensibility background, information governance background, so we don't ever want to edit the original documents. So these tags are only kept in our system, and our system regularly syncs with your data sources and makes sure, hey, the tags are still there, the files, the folders, everything is still there. In here, you have a couple methods of creating tags. With ZL, I wish I had a sales engineer with me so I could pull up the demo and show you guys visually, but you can always reach out to us for that. But we allow you to create as many tags as possible, and we let you also do hierarchical tags. So you can have something like a marketing tag, but under that marketing tag, you could have campaign tag, sales tag, records tag, legal hold tag. We let you select your own tags however you want. Hope that was helpful.
And then just one more question on the tags. Do you use AI to identify the tags?
Not exactly. We do have some of that going on. In here, AI gets a little bit risky, right? We're talking about divestitures. You have a requirement to send out this data. You have to make it defensible. You don't want to get sued. AI sometimes make mistakes, and when it makes mistakes, it's really hard to find them. It's really hard to detect them, right? That's one part of the equation. The other part is for AI to even know what it's doing, it needs to know some insight. It needs to know the context of the data, of the company, what it is trying to do. And training an AI software is usually the most expensive part of any deployment project. And in here, since it was such a niche project, right? You're trying to sell off one specific department. It was way more efficient to just go to the end users, to go to these departments, the records management department, compliance officers, e-discovery and legal officers, and ask them, hey, can you pour all of your insights into this data? With AI, there's also always this question of scalability. So whenever your data volumes expand, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So we did not use it for this specific case. We use it with our compliance tools though, because with compliance tools, it becomes very helpful to update your schedules, update your tags, compliance flags, right? So if you already have that, if you already have your rules set out and you're just looking for extra violations, you're looking for, hey, look, people get crafty. I want to catch these crafty people. I want to find these people who are committing fraud in ways never seen before. We have that AI to help you find those. It shows you, hey, like this person is doing more violations than before. Something must be up. But not in this case. Okay, I guess that was it from questions. So this is a bit more of our positioning, right? What's the problem with file shares? They're always growing, they're risky, they're hard to manage, right? And they cost a lot. The approach we've seen quite frequently is do a cleanup, spend months cleaning up this data. It usually doesn't work because people work on these data sources, right? They're there for collaboration. People keep on sharing data. Every file you send through Microsoft Teams gets put into a file share. So you can imagine how fast these things grow. So it becomes an unending battle. Instead, what we recommend is buy a more of a long-term management. Look at the processing depth of the tool you're getting. So that once you do your cleanup once, your tool already knows everything about this data. And once you know everything about your data, you can organize it pretty well into a beautiful library so that you don't ever have to clean them up again. This is super helpful, whether you're going to cloud and you want to keep your costs down, whether you just want to keep your records safe, selectively archive, grab those records that get lost in file shares, or you just want to do a proper cleanup project on your on-prem file shares. And you say, hey, we want to do this once and only once because it takes time and it takes money. Here is our usual recommendation if you're starting out with file shares. And this is how our tool works too. Right, start with file shares. Here are all the functionalities you can have. Next step is usually some reactive e-discovery, right? Just connect to other data sources, make sure they are searchable somewhat. You can grab this data when you get sued, kind of related to each other, right? We see a lot of data requests or searches being run on these shares. Next step is usually proactive e-discovery. Hey, if you're getting sued a lot, and if you want to be way more defensible, grab all this data, right? Once you have the management functions how you treat different data sources is pretty similar. Usual next step is records management. This is how you keep your data safe. This is how you minimize your deployment. Privacy comes next. They are very connected. I like to call privacy negative records, right? Because usually with records, you're trying to kind of keep things. With privacy, you're just like, I want to get rid of this. Next step is compliance. And lately, we've been working on doing analytics, especially with the growing Gen AI, right? All of this unstructured data, they're quite valuable. If you can export it out to an analytics tool, you can learn a lot about your workforce if you choose to do that, if your HR wants to do that. But either way, it's still helpful if you're doing e-discovery, right? Being able to analyze this data early on and really understand it, get a grasp of it, helps you a lot with the review stage. It helps you a lot when you're doing keyword negotiations because you know exactly what you're dealing with. So you get to say, hey, I want to settle because chances are I'm going to lose this case, or because I have too many documents, I don't want to deal with the review costs. So that early on analysis or analytics doesn't have to be used for HR or workforce management purposes. It's also super helpful when you get sued. And if you buy all of these tools in this order, that's what happens. You cover the whole evaluation framework. That's really all I had for today. If anyone has a last moment burning question, please still send them through. We love your questions. We love your suggestions. Let us know how we did in this webinar. We take each comment into account and we update our webinars each time. So the next time you hear from us, if you made a comment, if you made a suggestion, we'll be covering that too. Thank you.